A son of Hebrew slaves becomes a prince of Egypt, then leads his people to freedom. Special guests Carole Abramson and Rochelle join us to talk about Jewish prophecies, chewing gum in class, and the fine line between kitsch, melodrama, and overacting. Then we find out if the Ten Commandments stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have to say, do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut, and Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have to say, do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have to say, do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of The Test of Time. My name is Alan Noah. Your name is James Brief, and we're joined by our moms yet again, Rochelle Brief and Carole Abramson.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, this is so exciting to have you guys back on. This is the first time we've had you on the show, not for a Mother's Day episode, but for a Passover episode.
For a very special film.
Exactly. And I forget exactly how it came up that we would do the Ten Commandments as our next episode. I think just in the back and forth last year when we were thinking of movies to talk about, this one came up and we kind of said, well, that doesn't really make sense for Mother's Day. It's kind of more of a Passover movie. So we rescheduled. We did it earlier in the year this time around. Although you could argue that in some ways this story is about mothers and sons. I mean, that scene with Moses and his two moms is very powerful, I thought.
That's true.
But still, this is more of a Passover/Easter movie, I guess, depending on your point of view.
I mean, that's fair. And also in a movie called The Ten Commandments, the Ten Commandments are featured in the tiniest bit of the movie.
This is true.
So you could say it's arguably more about, Egypt and the mother's relationship. It's still on television every single year, still to this day.
Yeah. So, Rochelle, what's your background with this movie? Did you watch it back when you were a kid?
I have a very clear memory of this. I was in fourth grade in 1956, and my father took the day off from work, and he said he was taking me to see the Ten Commandments. Wow. I remember being very, very scared because I was missing school. School, and I thought I would get caught.
That's
we
so
were
cute.
we were so good those days. The worst thing we could do was chew gum in class, and that would humiliate us in front of the whole class. So skipping a day of school and going to the theater frightened me. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, so we went to one of these huge, spectacular movie theaters with the kitsch everywhere. We saw this film, and it was shocking to me. It was such an extravaganza. I remember during the intermission, we went into the lobby, and they were selling books, pamphlets of the Ten Commandments, of memorabilia.
Oh.
And I wanted it so badly. It was $1. And my father said, it's too much money.
Oh, man.
Because he had already spent $1 to get into the theater.
Sure.
I think it was 50 cents each. So I was so upset. I remember really, really wanting that book of the Ten Commandments. It was fabulous, and it's all we talked about in school. But I couldn't tell the teachers that I saw it on a Wednesday matinee, which it was.
Is the matinee because it was less expensive?
No, it was Wednesday afternoon, and at night it was too late.
Oh, yeah, okay. I was going to say, if you go to an 8 o'clock show, you don't leave the theater until Thursday lunchtime.
Yeah,
so.
Right. This must have been 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and we sat in the balcony, and it was awesome. We were awestruck, and I've seen it maybe 5 or 6 times. And as you said, it's every year during Passover, Easter. It's on network TV.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mom, what about you? Do you remember seeing this in the theater?
I seem to remember going to Radio City Music Hall with my parents to see it.
Oh.
That's all I remember, though. I don't remember the details of the movie. I remember going to Radio City, leaving Radio City, and then watching it on TV. Like you said, at least 5, 6 times throughout the years.
That's interesting. They showed movies at Radio City, huh?
Yeah, and you got a really good stage show for the price of a movie. It was great.
Wait, so there was a stage show and then the movie? With the Rockettes?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
It was a bargain. I remember going to see like Mary Poppins and stuff. You had to wait on a line. You threaded around the theater waiting to get in to see it.
Oh,
But it was real worth it with the show and the movie.
interesting.
It's very cool.
Okay, all right. Rockettes and Heston. I mean, that sounds like a
What more
fun.
could you ask?
Yeah, fun day in the city. All right. Well, James, you didn't see it in the theater. I'm curious if you saw this the way I did, which was in school.
No, I don't think we ever saw it in school. I just think this is something that would have just been shown either at home on one of those VHS tapes, probably 2 VHS tapes.
Or 3 or 4, maybe.
Yeah. That's how I knew it. I don't remember a specific time, but I guess, Al, you saw it in school. I guess that was over like 2 weeks.
Yeah, probably. I mean, a great thing for the teacher. I guess, you didn't have to teach for a while. We read the Bible in sophomore or junior year of high school. It was a public school, and he got away with it because he was treating it as text and literature and not religion. I remember even thinking at the time, like, is this okay? Maybe a gray area legally, separation of church and state and all that stuff. But he got away with it. I feel like maybe we watched it in Hebrew school too, probably at home. But it had definitely been a long, long time since I had seen the movie. But James, do you want to give our listeners a recap of what the movie's all about?
Sure. This movie is based on the biblical story of Exodus. In ancient Egypt, Jews were slaves, building pyramids, monuments, and cities. When the Pharaoh hears of a prophecy about a deliverer who will lead the Hebrews to freedom, he orders that all newborn male slaves be killed. A Hebrew mother places her son in a basket and sends him down the Nile, where he is discovered by the Pharaoh's daughter. She names him Moses and raises him as a prince of Egypt. Another Egyptian prince, Ramses, fears that Moses will take his place as the next pharaoh. Ramses discovers Moses' true heritage, and Moses is expelled from Egypt. Moses gets married and lives as a shepherd until God commands him to return to Egypt and free the slaves from Ramses, who is now Pharaoh. And working as a messenger of God, Moses brings 10 plagues to Egypt, beginning with turning water into blood and culminating with the death of every firstborn son, including Ramses' child himself. So Ramses frees the slaves after this, then changes his mind once again. The Egyptian army catches up with the Jews, but Moses parts the Red Sea, and they escape, and Moses leads the Hebrews to Mount Sinai, where God delivers his law, the 10 Commandments.
Right. I am not going to ask you if this movie was a hit, because I know that it is still to this day listed on the top movies of all time when adjusted for inflation. This was a epic hit back in the 50s, and I know they re-released it a bunch of times. This movie just made a ton of cash, right?
Yeah, and it had a huge budget for all the special effects and the 8 billion extras that were in the film, and just these sets. And I mean, watching this film, you could just tell because there's no computers. I mean, this must have cost a fortune.
Yeah.
It did. Anywhere between $10 and $15 million is what I've seen. Over its domestic runs, it's made upwards of $65 million. It was the #1 film of 1956. Do you know what film 10 Commandments beat? And then it was the reverse at the Academy Awards, because 10 Commandments was nominated but did not win Best Picture, but the #2 film of the year did win Best Picture.
No idea.
I'll give you a hint. Jackie Chan did a remake of this film 20 years ago or so.
Rumble in the Bronx. Yeah, that was it, right? I guess, right?
Around the World in 80 Days.
Oh, okay.
But who knows how much money this thing has made?
I feel like there's a joke in here. It's like it made more money than God, but that's probably extra sacrilegious in this context. So one thing that I definitely forgot about the movie is the prologue with Cecil B. DeMille standing in front of a curtain grabbing the microphone and holding it like he was wringing its neck, like Homer strangling Bart Simpson. You know that thing where sometimes you just don't know what to do with your hands? I felt like Cecil B. DeMille really didn't know what to do with his hands.
I don't think that was part of the movie when we saw it originally. But I must say that this is a movie that really should be seen on the big screen. It was such an epic extravaganza, over-the-top thing. It just doesn't seem as spectacular on my laptop as it did in the theater.
I can totally imagine that seeing this on the big screen would be a far different experience. And it's funny that even though this movie is so long, that it really didn't hurt the movie in terms of box office. Back then, I guess people didn't mind. People were okay to go and see a super long movie in the theaters.
Yeah, because that was the way to see it.
I don't know that I could tolerate a 4-hour movie. That was so special, so spectacular. Today, it would be very, very difficult for me to watch a 4-hour movie.
Yeah, same, 100%. And, from a test of time perspective, now it is hard to imagine a studio releasing one 4-hour movie. They would do the thing of splitting it into two halves, like they've done with Wicked, like they did with Dune, or maybe you make it a trilogy, or maybe you don't make it a movie at all. Maybe you make it a streaming series, 10 episodes. And there's a psychological thing there where a 10-episode streaming series, that's 10 hours, but people will watch 10 hours of a TV show and grumble about going to see one 3-hour movie. Even Wicked Part 1 was 2.5 hours, and people complained that was too long. But they'll watch 10 episodes of The White Lotus and 10 hours of that. So it is a psychological thing. But yeah, it's hard to imagine them making one 4-hour movie today. Okay, so the four of us are Jewish, and the movie obviously is about the Old Testament. But it's on TV every year around Passover and Easter. And, of course, Jews do not make up a huge portion of the population. There are far more Christians in America than Jews. So I wanted to get your opinion. Do you consider this a Jewish movie or a religious movie or just a big epic movie? What do you think?
Jewish epic.
Why? Why is that?
Because it's the Passover Seder. So it's just, bringing to life what we read every year at the Seder.
That makes sense.
I think it's Judeo-Christian. I know DeMille is not Jewish. Because it's always shown around Passover, we consider it part of the Haggadah. But I think it's more than that. It's more than a religious story. I think it's a story of slavery and liberation and redemption. So it's a theme that we've seen historically in other historical events. So although I see it as a Jewish story, I think it's way more than that.
From what I've read, Cecil B. DeMille talked about it as more of a morality story in terms of, the 10 Commandments teach these important moral lessons. But to your point, Rochelle, I think the movie's more about the immorality of slavery. And it's wrong for one group of people to subjugate another group of people. Moses talks about that explicitly throughout the movie.
But also, I think in order to sell the movie, there was so much of the romance that had to be, I think, at that time to get the audience in.
That's a good point, because I don't think that's biblical, Nefertiti and Moses.
I was wondering about that.
But it's also the Old Testament, which Christians read as well. And in fact, I think in the South, in schools, they teach the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
So it's not really Jewish, it's Judeo-Christian, it's both. We don't own that story. It's incorporated into the Christian Bible as well.
That's true, although it's about Moses leading the Hebrews. So even though there is that shared morality with the 10 Commandments, I do think that there is a heavy element of let my people go, my people being the Jews. And I'm not Christian, but I could imagine that if I were Christian, I wouldn't necessarily think of it as my people too.
Right.
I had mentioned it to Courtney, my wife, who is not Jewish, and she was saying that in her opinion, this is not a Jewish movie, that this is a religious movie, and they showed it in Sunday school to her. She was exposed to the movie because Jesus was a Jew, and the Last Supper was a Passover Seder. So we should know what the Passover Seder is. And I think all of that makes logical sense. I don't know if that's a widespread common belief. I did want to get back a little bit to Nefertiti and this love triangle and how a lot of this stuff is just not in the Bible. Cecil B. DeMille, in his intro in front of the curtain when he's strangling the microphone, he talks about how this movie is based on the Torah, but also other sources, because there are other texts that they have used. The Midrash, is that right?
Yeah, midrashes are kind of these like fables that go along. They're not written, but it's kind of like, oh, people have been talking about this midrash about what really happened, and
Right.
It's these oral traditions.
So they use other supplemental things, which makes sense to pad out the story. I mean, some of the story in the Bible is pretty sparse, and they don't give a lot of detail. But the love triangle thing, even if that is based on these other supplemental texts and oral traditions, it does feel Hollywood, right? Mm-hmm. It does kind of feel like this was something that was cooked up by a producer or a director, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a trope that there are these big and powerful men who are going to make some epic declaration. But then the woman behind the scenes is actually the one who's able to kind of really get what they want to do. And kind of it's a really powerful woman behind Ramses. I think it's kind of a Hollywood trope, but it's something that is often done. I didn't really remember that aspect when Pharaoh was totally going to let people go. And then it was the queen, Nefertiti. So are you the weakest Pharaoh ever? Basically, she's kind of humiliating him. And he's like, no, I'm a tough guy. And then, hardens his heart again, as it were.
Right. Hardens his heart is in the Bible. Yes. But it's not really clear what happens. It's just kind of a phrase. The Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And in the movie, we see that it was Nefertiti whispering in his ear, kind of leading him down that road. And to your point, James, there's that trope of behind every powerful man is a more powerful woman. And that's, maybe pro-women, that's a feminist kind of thing, maybe, although maybe not if it's the woman behind the man. But it also does play into a more negative stereotype of hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And Nefertiti, when she is scorned, that's when she really gets pissed. And that's when she causes a lot of suffering because Moses just kind of shunned her away. That, I think, is a more negative stereotype.
Right. I think there were a couple of romantic subplots. That was the big one. But also, you remember Dathan?
Yes.
Who does not exist in the Bible. Years ago, when I saw this for the third or fourth time, I had asked my rabbi, and he said, he's not part of the story in the Bible.
They take his name from another bad guy. But you're right. This guy that turns the Israelites against God, you're right, is a made-up character. Which is a well-made character. It's kind of needed in the screenplay.
But that introduces a subplot of conflict too, with also Lilia is her name. So there are a lot of romantic subplots which make Hollywood. Mm-hmm. I think Hollywood has to have some romance. I think that sells.
Right. One other thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of things that I don't think are in the Bible is this prophecy that there will be a deliverer. I don't remember that. I mean, I know that when God makes the covenant with Abraham, he talks about our people will be in bondage and then I will deliver them. But there's this idea in the movie that all of the Jews know that somebody is going to come to deliver them. Word of that gets to Pharaoh, and then that's why they order killing all of the firstborn infants, the males. From what I remember from the Haggadah and telling the story every year at Passover, that decision was made just because there were too many Jews. It wasn't about this prophecy.
Yeah, I think that's the line out. I think there's too many of them. I think they're also conflating a little bit of the Messiah aspect that people, Jews and Christians, are more used to.
Right. This idea of the prophecy of the chosen one, that also to me feels like a Hollywood edition. You see that in so many other movies, Star Wars, The Matrix, Dune more recently. Like it always comes up that there is somebody who will be the savior. And yeah, that does kind of feel more Jesus-like to me than Moses.
To this day, Jews talk about the Messiah coming.
Sure.
In the Jewish tradition, we don't acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah, but the Messiah is yet to come. It's a savior, a deliverer from horrible times. And during the Holocaust, people said, where is the Messiah? What better time is there for a Messiah than during the Holocaust? And a lot of the Jews lost faith. So the prophecy of a deliverer of Jews is not a new concept, but they introduced it into this movie as well.
Yeah.
But something I thought that was very interesting in this film that's not really in Exodus is this relationship that Moses has with Ramses as kind of beloved brothers in a lot of ways. And also the father favoring Moses over Ramses. And this is a very almost Shakespearean-like love triangle where everyone has a relationship, but it's with the wrong person. And, the father you'd think he'd love his firstborn who's going to ascend, but he loves the second one. Even though, of course, Ramses and Seti is the father's name. Seti. They're all terrible people. They have babies and, people murdered all the time. But there's some sympathy, I think, in this film, the way this film makes it, that there's this betrayal of like, oh, even my son would do this to me? I gave you everything, and you'd betray us like this. Oh yeah, Dad, also, you like murder the firstborn son of everyone I came from. So, there is that.
Rochelle, you said that Jews don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Something else we don't believe in is the concept of hell. When Moses comes down from Mount Sinai and he sees Dathan leading this bacchanalia of sin, he throws the 10 Commandments into the golden calf and sends Dathan and the sinners to hell, right? I mean, that looks pretty literal, as in they are going to hell.
The earth opens up and they fall into a crevice.
Yeah.
Did you interpret that as hell?
I did. I thought that was hell. What did you think?
I don't think so. No.
No, I didn't see it as hell. Only you, Al.
Oh, okay. I mean, the ground opens and there's fire. I mean, that's hell, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I just thought the earth swallowed them up.
I thought it was more of a Hollywood thing, that the ground splits open and people fall in. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's scary, but it never really happens in real life, I don't think.
Well, yeah. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the acting in this movie. What did you think about the acting, Mom?
By today's standards, there was a lot of overacting, I think, going on.
I agree. Yeah, I had that exact same thought. There is a fine line between acting and overacting.
And hamming it up.
Exactly. And I tend to think that there are some actors who are more guilty of that in general. The first one that pops in my mind is Al Pacino, where there's a tendency to go into overacting. And I'm not really super familiar with Charlton Heston. I know we saw him in Soylent Green. I know he's done lots of other movies.
Planet of the Apes?
Maybe I saw that once. I think, honestly, I'm more familiar with Phil Hartman doing Charlton Heston on Saturday Night Live, and also kind of as Troy McClure, who is kind of often doing a Charlton Heston kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But the way that he delivers these lines, your eyes are more beautiful than all of the cedars in Lebanon. Like, it does feel like, okay, maybe if you didn't ham it up that much, maybe the movie would have only been 3 hours, like he could have tightened it up a little bit. Rochelle, what did you think of Charlton Heston?
Well, it was a melodrama.
Yeah.
And I think acting today is different than it was in the 50s. It was very theatrical and staged.
Yeah.
Rather than reality. at the parting of the Red Sea, there were three maidens just languishing on a rock,
Yeah.
which seems so theatrical, almost kitsch, almost laughable.
Yes.
But it worked, I thought, in that day. But if you're asking about the acting, I think it was for its time.
Well, if you ever see a Broadway show, people will talk differently than they talk in real life. They will talk like this, very loudly and enunciating, and they're aware that there's a huge audience there. And in some ways, this film was made like that.
Yeah, I think there is something to just the fact that this is based on the Bible, all of the thous and these. And yeah, it is meant to sound different than the way people talk today. And I'm sure even the way people just talked in casual conversation in 1956. So I get that. And I do think that there probably is a line between kitsch and melodrama and overacting. And I'm not sure exactly where a lot of this movie's performances would fall into. But I did think that Charlton Heston stood out in terms of his delivery more than the other actors in the movie. Yul Brynner, I thought, did a great job. The actress who plays Nefertiti was great. And I think, yeah, sometimes those lines can be a little hammy and over the top, but I do wonder if it was really just more of the Phil Hartman effect on me personally, that everything Charlton Heston said, I kind of was rolling my eyes at a little bit.
But they also were completely overlooking the fact that Moses had a stutter.
Right. That is a big part of the Bible. Yeah, I completely forgot about that.
I was thinking that watching it, I'm like listening to him delivering these lines and thinking, but he had a stutter. So they were going the opposite way.
Aaron speaks for Moses because of the stutter.
Right.
And Aaron doesn't really have a ton to do in the movie.
He didn't have to. He was gorgeous. Chuck said when his mother used to watch the movie, she thought he was gorgeous.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, they give Aaron stuff like Aaron, I will make this epic speech. You drop the staff, and it'll turn into a snake. Right. I feel like Joshua is more of has more of a prominent role in this film in some ways than Aaron.
Yeah, that's true. That
Yes,
is
he did.
definitely true.
Oh, that's right. I'm confusing them. It was Joshua that was gorgeous.
Oh.
Not Aaron.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I mean, I thought they were both good-looking
No,
guys,
John Derek.
I guess, but no.
John Derek.
Okay, it was Joshua. All right, we'll keep the biblical heartthrob straight, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the special effects, because I think this was something that was a big deal when the movie came out, based on my understanding. But Mom, Rochelle, you were there. Mom, I'll ask you first. When you saw this movie in the theater, did it blow you away just in terms of the visuals?
I would imagine it did. I don't remember, but I would think, that they could do that at that time. Yeah.
Okay. Rochelle, what about you?
Yeah, it absolutely blew me away. And I have a very clear memory of the first time I saw it. And it's also interesting to note that, as you said before, the film was nominated for a whole bunch of Oscars, and the only one that it did win was special effects.
Right.
So it really stood out. And I think that's one of the clearest memories is the parting of the Red Sea, but also the waters turning bloody, the staff turning into a snake.
I think the depiction of God is quite well done. I didn't realize for years that it was just a cartoon.
Which depiction of God?
Wasn't the fire kind of like animated in some ways?
You mean the burning bush? Or like on Mount Sinai?
The fire of God kind of blocking the Egyptians. That kind of looks like it's an animation, right?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, the pillar of fire at the Red Sea. That looked cartoony, but not horrible. The burning bush, to me, looked the worst. I thought that the rod turning into a snake looked really bad, but when the snake turned back into the rod after, that I thought looked pretty cool. That was actually impressive because it looks like he grabs a snake and it really does turn back into the staff in his hand. When the staff first turns into a snake, that looked pretty cheesy. And also, you don't see Moses' snake eating the other two snakes. You just see their faces oh, look, now Moses' snake is eating the other snakes. Whoa. Because I think they just couldn't really show it. Honestly, to me, I think the special effect that has aged the best is the Ten Commandments. When the words are like etched in the tablet themselves, that looks great. I mean, I don't think it was a particularly complicated effect. I think it was just gunpowder, but that just looks great. I'm sure it looked great then. That looks really good now.
I thought that was fantastic. I agree. I thought the other really good practical effect was the Nile turning into blood. I thought that was very well done.
Yes, agreed.
Especially as Ramses is pouring some jug. And, he's probably pressing some button or something to release the fruit punch or something after a few seconds of clear water. But it was just very well done. Moses, obviously, there's something in his staff maybe that turns it red, or maybe they're releasing the red under the water as he touches the water. The waterfalls by Ramses' garden start turning red. Again, obvious how it's done, but it just still looks very good today because it's a purely practical effect.
I was disappointed that we only see, I think, 3 plagues, right? There's blood, and then the hail, and the death of the firstborn. They mention the others. They mention frogs and the pestilence and locusts and boils and things, but you don't see any of them. They did film the frog plague, but it just didn't look right. And Cecil B. DeMille said if it doesn't look right, he didn't want to include it.
Yeah, frogs is the silliest one. I mean, you could have fields of dead animals. You could have people with boils all over their face. Show a little montage of that.
Yeah.
But the death of the firstborn, that was great. There was a part where the Pharaoh and his captain of the guards and the captain of the guard's son are all standing on a balcony, and then suddenly this kind of dark cloud goes at their feet, and then the guy just collapses into the smoke.
When the soldier's son died, it made me think, wasn't Ramses the firstborn of his father?
Yeah, he's specifically spared from this, so that he could see the folly of his ways.
They never mentioned that.
It is one of those like midrashes, as you say.
Oh,
okay. It's one of because that's a question that's always been asked, like how come he wasn't killed? But I think it was specifically he was exempted.
Oh, okay.
During the death of the firstborn, I a little bit didn't love the scene with Moses when they were kind of doing the Seder. Like it felt a little too on the nose when they were talking about why is this night different from all other nights? I mean, I roll. Yeah. Even when they explain the matzah, why do we eat this unleavened bread? Like, no.
Because it was them that didn't have the time. So how could it be in the Seder before
Exactly. Right. That would come after.
Yes. Right.
The bread doesn't have time to rise the next day. Right, like tomorrow. Right. So yeah, that I kind of was rolling my eyes at a little bit. I did appreciate when they did say the angel of death will pass over our house. Because I think the first time, I think Joshua says it to Dathan, like he puts the blood on his house and he says, so that the angel of death will pass by or something. And I was like, oh, come on. It was right there. Say it. Say pass over. But then later on, they did say that. But yeah, I did feel like some of that scene was just a little too...
quicker than our Seders.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I'm constantly yelled at for doing our Seders too slow. Is that a problem at the Brief household?
No, our Seders are pretty good. No one complains of the length because we have our own little traditions during the middle of it that we're looking forward to at each little part. That are basically through years of like someone 15 years ago mispronounced a word here and it's still funny every time they do it.
How long do your Seders last?
The beginning boring part or the whole meal?
The Seder. The meal is separate.
Going through the Haggadah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the beginning boring part, you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe an hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we don't do anything afterwards. That's the key at the Brief household, if you ever want to have a Seder with us.
Well, am I invited?
Absolutely. That's the point of
both of you.
But yeah, we don't do anything
and your
after
family.
the meal. Do you continue after the meal to do more Seder stuff?
Yeah, that's what you have to do.
Man.
Haggadah.
Yeah, you have to do Haggadah. You have to let in Elijah. There's 2 more glasses of wine. You skip that?
Yeah.
We'll open the door and then we'll let the kids look for the afikomen. Yeah.
Who hides the afikomen?
Usually my dad does.
All right, is he good at it?
The afikoman is usually hidden within arm's reach of where my father's sitting. Like, he doesn't always do it, but I would say 90% of the time, if you're at a Seder where El Paul Brief is hiding the afikoman, it will be within 5 feet of where he's sitting.
That's really funny. One other thing I just wanted to mention, I know that some of these things are just part of the story and it's part of the Bible, and the story is a story. The source material is a source material. I always hated the golden calf thing. That always just felt like, come on, guys. Come on, Jews. Don't we have a little bit more patience than this? I can't help but feel like it makes us look bad. We beheld these awesome wonders, these 10 plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, and then it's like, oh yeah, well, Moses went up on the mountain and it's been a while, so yeah, let's just forsake God and build this golden calf. I hate that part of the story. That bothered you too, Mom?
Yeah.
It seems out of character and just...
Maybe that's why they invented Dathan.
Oh, so that he's the one kind of pushing it? Well, you know what? Maybe. Even still, it's like, why are people listening to Dathan still?
Right.
Like, Dathan was awful in Egypt. He sold out his own people. When they get to the Red Sea, he's like, let's go back. The sea parts. And so then, like, okay, we're just done listening to Dathan, right? Why are people still listening to this fucking guy, you know?
Well, subsequent to the golden calf, Moses brings down the 10 commandments, and one of the commandments is do not bow down to idols.
Right.
So that idolatry comes afterwards. So that may have been one of the reasons for that commandment.
Oh, okay.
I absolutely think the golden calf is it's a fantastic story. I think the Bible is sprinkled with these things all over. Probably one of the other most famous stories is, okay, I have built this brand new planet for you. You will never suffer and you will live forever. And this is the most brilliant paradise ever. The only cost of this, I'm going to give you 10 billion apple trees, but just that one fruit tree right there you can't have. What's the first thing that humans do? Of course, they eat from the forbidden tree. It's like, Ramses, what the fuck do we have to do for you to get that this God is really mad and you better let these people go? He just doesn't get it and keeps being that stupid. And yeah, the Jews and every single person watching this film or reading this book, whether you're Jewish, Christian, or none of those, this can happen to you too. If you see all of this stuff, but then Moses says, I'll be right back, and he's not right back, you're going to go insane too. I mean, you can. This kind of story is definitely test the faith of people over and over, and they usually fail the test at first.
I get all of that. I think it's also more problematic in this movie because it's the thing I always say. It's the voiceover. The voiceover comes on and says, and the people grew impatient, and so they turned to Dathan and the golden calf. If you want to make that point, then you need to show it. Show these people in the desert who are out of food and they're angry and they're frustrated. And the movie doesn't show us, it just tells us. It also does that later on when Moses brings everyone to Canaan, and then he's not allowed to go into the Holy Land because he and God got into a fight about some water thing, which is in the Bible. That's a story, but we don't see it in the movie. And so it feels just out of left field.
Yeah.
And I think if you want to adapt these biblical stories, then you kind of have to show these things. And I also understand why DeMille chose not to show these things, because at this point we're at almost 4 hours. You don't need to add more to the story. But it just feels like, wait, why doesn't Moses get to go in there? Why do these people turn to the idol? It's not shown. And that's why it's frustrating.
That's fair that, all the way up to the parting of the Red Sea is about 3 hours and, 30 minutes. And then there's a lot of story that they compress into that last 20 minutes. You're right.
Exactly. All right. Well, Mom, what do you think about the 10 Commandments? Does the movie stand the test of time?
In some respects, yes. In some respects, no. It's a biblical story that will always be there. So in that sense, yes. But the acting, the special effects, not so much. So I think ultimately, yes, it does stand the test of time.
All right, Rochelle, what do you think? Do you think the movie stands the test of time?
I think it does, absolutely. And as I said earlier, the fact that it's shown every year on TV, on network TV, and there's always an audience, I think there's still interest in seeing it again and again. And the Bible stands the test of time. People still read it. My concept of Moses is still Charlton Heston. That's how I picture Moses. So I would say yes.
All right. James, what do you think?
I think Mom nailed it. To me, Moses is Charlton Heston, and this is the way Ramses looked, and this is the way the Ten Commandments looked on these tablets, and it's just so ingrained in several generations that blurs the line between what was in the Bible and what's just in the Ten Commandments. And I'm sure a lot of people have gotten Sunday school book reports done wrong by trying to write a story from Exodus, and they're totally caught because none of that stuff was in the Ten Commandments. But it's so ubiquitous that people can almost think, I don't have to read those chapters in Exodus. I could just watch the Ten Commandments and I'll get the story. I think the film stands the test of time. It's certainly got outdated things in it, some special effects, but surprisingly, some special effects are still I was still very impressed by. So overall, this is an epic film. You need some time to watch it. I did not watch it in one sitting, but if you have the time over a weekend or so to watch it, then yes, it's definitely worth it. What do you think, Al?
So I kind of agree with you, Mom. Like, there are things about it that do stand the test of time and some things that really don't. Charlton Heston's acting doesn't. A lot of the special effects don't. The runtime doesn't. Like I was saying before, it would be 2 movies. It would be a trilogy. It would be a streaming series, 10 episodes. Hell, you could even do a couple seasons, do a season on Genesis and then another season on Exodus. There's probably not much with Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those are all laws. But you could tell these stories in a modern way. I can't imagine Hollywood making this movie now. I feel like it just would be considered too preachy. I mean, I don't know the numbers. I feel like you see it sometimes that atheism is more prevalent. People who are really religious, that number keeps shrinking in the country. But regardless of like broad trends, I just feel like this movie wouldn't be made by a major studio today. I think there are other studios outside of Disney and Paramount and Warner Brothers that make these movies. When I took Eli to see Captain America, Brave New World, we got there really early. And before the regular trailer started, there were other trailers for these super religious movies that I'd never seen before. There was one about the Last Supper and one about, like some modern family, and they were coming to Jesus and praying a lot. And then, the quote unquote regular movie trailer started. So there is an appetite for religious content, but I don't know. It's just really hard for me to imagine Paramount greenlighting a huge biblical epic of this scale for one movie today. Also, I do think these things are cyclical and, maybe it wouldn't play now, but in another 5-10 years it could. I do think, though, that in regards to this specific movie, this version of the Ten Commandments from 1956, I think it does stand the test of time just because this version does endure. It endures because people still know of it, because people still watch it, because people still reference it. And even though it does feel cheesy and dated in a lot of aspects, just because this movie is so referenced and revered, I think, it does stand the test of time.
Something else interesting that I noticed in this film, it's 4 hours, but it's not boring. Almost every scene is kind of either important for the plot or it's just kind of interesting.
I hear what you're saying. It moves, but there are scenes that drag on, especially when Moses goes to Jethro and meets Sephora. There's a lot of talking and a lot of dancing, and then more talking about God, and then talking about Nefertiti, and talking about, how beautiful Sephora is. I felt the movie dragging there, especially.
Perhaps.
But Rochelle, Mom, thank you so much for joining us again. This was awesome.
Thank you.
We found out your mother's more of a John Derek fan versus a John Carradine fan, who John Derek was Joshua and John Carradine was Aaron. So, one was the heartthrob and one was not.
You know who John Derek married?
No.
Bo Derek.
No, she's a real 10.
He was a heartthrob.
But we have to do this again. We have to have you back on the show again.
Absolutely.
For your 5th time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And Chag Sameach. Have a wonderful Passover.
You too.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we will continue the theme of nepotism as Samantha Noah joins us to discuss American Psycho. That's one of her favorite movies. I'm excited to have Sam back on the show to talk about that. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. You can send us an email at thetestoftimepodcast@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye-bye.
So let it be written. So let it be done.
And so let it be listened to.
Oh, yeah, that too.